Okay, in this video, we are going to talk about square roots, which we should feel pretty comfortable with. We're just going to talk a little vocabulary. The number a is a square root of b if a squared equals b. So the number a is a square root of b. So a is a square root of b if a squared equals b. So here are some examples. Let's do some numbers. 4 is a square root of 16 because 4 squared equals 16. So 4 equals the square root of 16, and 4 squared equals 16. Okay? -4 is also a square root of 16, is a square root of 16 because -4 squared equals 16. And I'm going to use a few words here. I'm going to use the word index, and I'm going to use the word radicand. And we've already talked about these values or these words before in previous lessons, so hopefully you're just recalling this. Now, when I do something like this, if I were to say 5 squared equals 25, and then go backwards and say the square root of 25, what's happening is this square is the index, the square root of 25. But the square root is the most popular index, so we leave it blank. But if we need the cubed root, the fourth root, the fifth root, that's when we have to put that index in there. Now the principal square root, that's positive. And the positive square root is the one that is always assumed. And when I say assumed, that means when you put the square root of 25 in your calculator, you're not going to get two different answers. When you put the square root of 16 into your calculator, you're not going to get a 4 and a -4. You're going to get the positive value only. The calculator is going to give you just the principal square root. A negative square root, you have to be told. So for the negative square root, you need to be told. And we're told that it's negative through a negative sign, and that negative sign will be on the outside. So a negative sign on the outside of the square root. Or, one other time, when you're solving for x squared. So this one right here, it may take us a little bit to get to this situation, but we're going to get there. So let's just do a few practice problems. We want to simplify each one of these. So the first example, we want to simplify the square root of 64. So the square root of 64 is 8, and it is only 8, because remember the principal square root is what's assumed. So the square root of 64 is 8. If we want it to be the negative square root, we're going to have a negative on the outside of the radical. So for instance, negative square root of 100. Well, we know that the square root of 100 is 10. And then we tell our reader, hey, we want the negative value by putting that negative. We want the negative square root, so we put that negative on the outside of the radical so that we know that our answer is -10. So I'm going to box that, and I'm going to say the negative was on the outside of the radical. Okay, I'm going to do one more example. Plus or minus the square root of 9/16. So here we're telling the reader we want both. We want the positive and the negative square root. So that's exactly what they're going to get. They're going to get the positive and the negative, and then what times itself is 9/16. Well, that would be 3/4. So plus or minus 3/4. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 tries. We've got the square root of 49. We've got plus or minus the square root of 36. And we've got negative square root of 121. Go ahead and try those 3. See what you get for an answer. And then make sure you press pause so that you can write down the problems and your answer. And then press play when you're ready to reveal. So the first is just a 7. The second is plus or minus 6. And the third is a -11. -11. Okay, here's another example. We've got plus or minus the square root of 0. So we want the positive square root and the negative square root. However, the square root of 0 is just 0. And 0 has no sign associated with it, so we can't put a plus or minus in front of it because 0 is signless. It doesn't have a sign. Okay, one more. We've got the square root of -16. So now the negative is on the inside of the radical. So when the negative is in the radicand, the square root is not real. It's going to involve an imaginary number, which you'll learn in Algebra 2. So for right now, we just say not real. Okay, here are a couple for you to try. We've got the square root of -4, and we've got the square root of 1/25. So go ahead and give those a whirl, and when you're ready to reveal the answer, press play. So the first one is not real because that negative on the inside of the radical. And the second one is the square root of 1/25 would be 1/5. 1/5 times itself gets us back to 1/25. So now in the next video, we're going to talk about rational versus irrational square roots. So rational versus irrational square roots. We'll have some examples and tries. It does go rather quickly, but hopefully I'll show you something that either you already knew and you feel a little bit more comfortable with, or maybe I'll show you something that you've never seen before when it comes to